Hello!
Friends. This is the third and final episode of our catch-up on our 2020 reads that we have not reviewed yet. So Maki was right, it is 3 episodes. Which you might remember if you watched the first of the 3.
In which case, check those out too.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I'm gonna kick things off with a book that I did not plan to read, but I ended up doing it on a whim.
I didn't think we were planning to get it, but here it is now and it's
no,
great.
no, I was always planning to get it.
Perfect.
I just did not
wasn't
think
planning to get
I was gonna read it. And the book in question is The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. This is a book that is actually mentioned in the original Shadow and Bone trilogy. It is one that is referenced constantly because there is a particular religion that the people of Ravka follow, and this is like a book about the saints that they look up to and sort of take inspiration from. I actually listened to this on audio because, number one, well, first, Lauren Fortgang is one of the narrators, and the other narrator is Ben Barnes, who, as you might already know, is playing the Darkling in the Grishaverse TV show.
And for those of you who didn't know, Prince Caspian.
Yes, basically.
That guy.
And honestly, it was so much fun. So what I did was similar to what I did with the Illuminate Files, where I was listening to it, but I also read along because I liked the illustrations. And it was great. It really reminds me of my childhood because I had a book of Catholic saints where it's basically the same thing. It'll like have a drawing and then you'll, get to read their story and how they were canonized, basically. In this book, it's kind of more fantastical than that because a lot of the things that happen in the book feel very magical. And it feels almost like a cross between a book about actual saints and also a book about fairy tales. Because a lot of the situations we find the saints in are very fairy tale-like. And it's great,
and actually. I was there for some of the narrations and I was sort of
first of all, both
shoulder.
of them are incredible narrators, so I'm gonna like give them props for that. But like I also think that it's cool because it kind of expands the Grishaverse a little bit more. Because you're seeing more of this world through the lens of these stories, and I think that's always like a good thing. There's so much of that world I think we have yet to experience, even considering we already have 2 or 3 series in it.
Maybe they'll work it into a Netflix series.
Oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna cry. The fact that Leigh Bardugo had all these stories in her head, like, and was able to pen them, I'm like, it is incredible how much of this world we don't even know about yet, honestly. And like Maki says, I'm curious to see if there's some way they're going to integrate it, whether it's into the next book about Nikolai, or the Grishaverse TV series, the Shadow and Bone TV series, which is coming out on Netflix in April, which is so exciting. So yeah, highly recommend this if you are a Grisha fan. If you aren't, it's probably not going to be something that you need to pick up right away. Yeah. Wouldn't recommend it. And if you're an audiobook person, definitely try that out because Ben Barnes reading you stories that sound like fairy tales is perfection. Really. And Lauren is also a great narrator, mind you.
All right. So mine is going to be X-Men Phoenix in Darkness by Grant Morrison. So this was the Grant, I think if not necessarily the finale or one of the finales of the Grant Morrison run of the X-Men. Happened years and years ago, ages ago, in relative comparative time, and was the last known great death of Jean Grey. Of the 800 million times that she's killed. If you want a quick, awesome commentary on Jean Grey and her lives and times and deaths, there is a social media sort of like site or out there called Black Nerd Problems. One of them gives a really fun dissertation on the X-Men and he mentions Jean Grey amazingly, so I highly recommend that if you really want some awesome take on that. I wanted to revisit it because I barely remember reading it, and here we are again, finally, and I don't recommend it to anybody who's used to the new stuff because obviously it's super dated and it's an old sort of like storytelling trope where they're just gonna put new mutants and everything and all that kind of stuff and sort of just weave everything together. And it is, to be fair, it is a finale, so unless you have some idea of what happened prior to this thing, Scott and Emma's affair, and Scott being...
Me rolling my eyes at that.
But because he came fresh from being one of Apocalypse's slaves, and therefore could not find himself, and for whatever reason, going into the same rhythms with Jean just didn't help, and suddenly Emma was there to have... And it was a psychic... It's a lot of things. And then there's the sexual tension between Jean and Wolverine, which like never happened. So it's a lot of things that literally don't exist now. Because of the new stuff. Oh well. Except for the fact that she died at the end of this thing. Spoilers, but that's like saying... It's like trying to spoil the Titanic. You can't. It happened. Especially because... It's
happened so many times though.
Especially because there's so many promos of Jean's coming back. I'm like, of course she is. We were just waiting. So...
I mean, she really is a phoenix then.
Yeah, so why read it at all is because the cool thing that happens here is that it takes you into an alternate future where Scott actually gives up on reforming the X-Men after Jean's death. It was a time where, a crossroads in time, where Emma asks him, hey, we should reopen the school.
Okay.
And Scott goes, no. And then a terrible alternate future springs from that. You go headfirst into it. It is just as brutal and as crazy and as gritty as the whole Grant Morrison run of things. Watch it for that. If you like an alternate universe that's not Days of Future Past. This is something worse, I think, even. I mean, you know, if mutant concentration camps are like old hat to you,
Okay.
then here's another horrible future for mutants in its place.
I think I'll just be in the one where they're all in Krakoa.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and everyone's fine, you know.
They're a powerful, like, force in the world.
Mom and dad, you know, mom's room is adjoining with dad and Uncle Wolverine's. I mean, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. By the way, to nobody's surprise, in that alternate future, guess who's still around with his claws? He's
like a cockroach.
He's just never gonna die, like, ever. You know?
Basically.
Like, they're just not gonna. And here's the thing, they did kill him too, and now he's back. So, and now that, by the way, and here's the thing, Krakoa, nobody dies anymore.
Ah, right.
Ever.
That's right.
Because people just get resurrected. They have resurrection protocols. They have a line. They have a list. There's 5 people, and all they do is bring mutants back to life. That's their full-time job, and they love that.
I mean,
So
why not?
So it's a far cry from that. It's just, here's a terrible future. Little do people know, House of X and Powers of X also does have a time jump into the far, far, far future. So it sort of pales in the light of the new premise, but it is still an oldie, and to many, I'm sure, still a goodie. Because who doesn't want to see Jean die
Again.
and affect the future again and again? So there's that.
My next book is My Calamity Jane, which is by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is another book in their Jane series. This is actually the last one in that series, and it is about Calamity Jane. Although in this book, we actually know her as Calamity Jane because she is part of a traveling sort of sideshow. She's in this sideshow with Frank Butler, he's a sharpshooter, and Frank, you know, he's kind of a flirt, kind of like is determined to keep traveling with the sideshow because he enjoys it. He actually meets his match when he meets Annie Oakley, who is also a sharpshooter and happens to be extremely good. Did I mention that there are also werewolves in this story? Because there are werewolves in this story.
There are werewolves, not their werewolves.
Not their werewolves.
That would have been cool though, but yes. Okay,
anyway, the thing about all the stories that the Lady Janies have ever written is they take a historical figure that you might know, like Calamity Jane, and in this case Frank Butler and Annie Oakley, who are all historical figures in American history, and they do kind of tell you the real story, the real story, because it always involves some sort of fantastical element that everyone has neglected to mention in the history books.
In this case,
that kind of thing. And you know, I didn't think I would appreciate this one as much as the other two, because the first one was about Jane Grey, who is a English queen, or she was queen for 9 days, and
Sure.
The second one was about Jane Eyre, which was also like sort of European. This is the first time that they set it in the United States, and you know what? It was a lot of fun. I haven't read a lot about Western American history, or the Wild West, really. So I know, what I know of it is like very, very basic. So it was kind of fun to like read a new setting, kind of get to know a few things about it. And I was familiar with all of the characters, just not as detailed as I am now thanks to this book. But the thing that always works for me with their books is that their specific brand of narration and hilarity and wit, it just works. They like to sprinkle a lot of pop culture references into their stories, and I love that. This one especially is really fun because they have a lot of musical references in it. My favorite one is the one where they reference Annie Get Your Gun.
Oh, hey, yeah.
Because, you know, Annie Get Your Gun. And they also reference the song Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better.
Which is probably...
because she says it to Frank, which is great. I also really like the werewolf aspect of it. I didn't think I was going to because I'm not very big on werewolves, but I think they did it in a way that was kind of just hilarious and fun. And it felt like it could have actually happened, and that's always the important part to me. Is this my favorite of the Jane series? Probably not. That still belongs to the second book, and I know I'm in the minority on that one because I feel like everyone loves the first book the most. But this was so much fun. It is definitely another strong addition to that particular series, and I think you should check it out if you've read the other two and enjoyed them. I'm really excited for the new one though, because now they're going to start writing about Marys. And I feel like that's going to be very, very fun. The first book is actually called My Contrary Mary, which is going to be so exciting. I'm so excited for that.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this one and would highly recommend.
Awesome. Rounding my reviews off, and the last of the big books that I sort of read in 2020 would have to be this oldie and goodie. Speaking of oldies and goodies,
goodie.
This is Rogue Squadron by Michael Stackpole from the Legends universe and the Star Wars franchise. It's set right after Return of the Jedi, roughly that era, about a couple of years or so. The galaxy has not yet fully been freed of the Empire's grip, and the Empire is still sort of parked on Coruscant, which is sort of like the main capital of the previous Empire, and eventually the capital of the New Republic. But they're at an era where they need, like, all of the people who have joined the Rebel Alliance, especially after the Death Stars have been blown up and Palpatine's dead, they need sort of like a figurehead, a symbol of the Alliance that will drive into the heart of the Empire and dispel its evil. And they thought, why not the most decorated squadron who've done the impossible, Rogue Squadron?
Your favorite.
So, my favorite. So, whereas and the mortality rate is terrible. There were 2 people that survived the first Death Star run, 6 pilots survived the escape from Hoth in Empire Strikes Back, and 4 people survived the second Death Star run. But in all of which, all the survivors, one particular survivor stands out, Wedge Antilles, who is the captain of Rogue Squadron.
Right.
He's a badass, and I love him so much. And this is, so it's told from his perspective, but then it focuses on the newer pilots, specifically this new Corellian pilot. And if for those of you who don't know what Corellia is, just think that's where Han Solo comes from. Like that's the significance. So they're all like, don't tell me the odds. It's all a lot of nods to the, the one-liners. And Koran Horn is our Corellian in question. He used to be part of Corellian security, so Corsac. And he and some of his friends defected to the rebellion because Corellia was at the time sort of like part of, still in cahoots with the Empire. And so now he's a rebel. And so he's joined Rogue Squadron as their new hotshot pilot. And now their sudden mission is, let's take on the Empire and drive it out of the core worlds. And it's great. It still holds out. So there's still a lot of adrenaline. There's some maneuvers in here that I'm just like, oh man, that's so cool. There's some dogfight stuff in here that I'm just like, I wish I thought of that. But this is where a lot of the heraldry comes in, of what the squadron means and how we are the squadron that you send when you need the impossible done. And I just freaking love that. So it's great. Highly recommend it for anybody who wants to know anything about X-Wings. I have not yet read the new X-Wing thing. I figured I'd, kind of take a dip and I review the old stuff and then look at the new stuff. Not so much just to compare, but just so that I know what I love and I'm reminded of what I love. Yeah. So that I know.
And it would be nice too, like maybe for all like the new stuff will have
could be in the same spirit of it. Yeah.
Or like the hallmarks at least.
That's what I'm looking for, the hallmarks. I love that! The hallmarks!
I read your mind.
You do.
Is basically it. Okay, the last 2 books I'm going to talk about are actually part of the same series, which is why I'm grouping them together. It's The Bear and the Nightingale and The Girl in the Tower, both by Catherine Arden. So The Bear and the Nightingale is the first book, and it was actually a reread for me. And it is basically the story of Vasya and her family. And it's sort of a blend of Russian folklore and fairy tales because their lives are getting upended by a whole series of mystical creatures in it. And it is as slow as I remember it being. It's very atmospheric, and the atmosphere is the point of it because it's supposed to set you into the mindset of this is like a fairy tale. It's a modern version of one, but it is still a fairy tale. The magic is woven into it pretty subtly at first because you just sort of get introduced to the different types of creatures that might exist in Russian folklore and the roles they play, like household roles or like life roles or whatever it is. And it's a really slow story. Like nothing really happens at first because it's basically centered in one household. And in that regard, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marilliard. It's that kind of slow, sort of moving thing. But I love it because it really does remind me of a fairy tale, I think. Like, that slow beginning, and you get the nagging sense that something is about to go wrong, and you watch it spiral and spiral and spiral until it finally crescendos like into the thing. Like a real fairy tale. And I really like that a lot, too. I did listen to part of this on audio, and the only reason I was able to get away with it is because I've actually read it before. So I did know, like, a little bit of it. I didn't remember as much as I thought I had, but I knew enough that I could keep track of it. Because I feel like if you jump into the audio right away first, you might find it a little confusing because there are a lot of different terms thrown in there. There's a lot of like names that sound confusing, I'm sure. But since I had read it, it didn't bother me too much. I really liked being dropped back into this atmosphere. It's a very perfect for winter read because the setting is very wintry. It's in like the Russian countryside. They live in a town that's like so far from Moscow and the capital and stuff. So you don't really like
kind of cool
get a chance to like see like bustling city life in it. So I really like that a lot. And I still love the way the story like crescendos at the end. I really, really loved watching this story play out as it did. So what happened was I also read The Girl in the Tower, which is the second book. This one is the complete opposite in that because you're already set in that world, you actually dive straight into the action.
There you go.
So the events that take place at the end of the book definitely inform where Vasha is and what she does in this story. And I'm not going to spoil it because this is the kind of thing we do on the channel. But I will say it was a lot of fun to be with her for this part of her journey because there's so much more action in it.
Nice.
And she has so much more agency in it. She's able to make more choices on her own and to like really stand up for herself in it. And I respected that so much, even though half the time I was like, Vasha, why are you doing this? This is reckless and foolish. And why are you like this? I like that it also opens up the fairy tale part of it a little more because you see a different kind of fairy tale this time, and it's great. Unlike the first one, this one actually is partially set in more urban settings, so there's more of a city setting. So it's a little bit of a contrast with where you were in the first book and where you are in this one, and it's great. Honestly, this book was even better than the first one, and I'm really excited about that because I've heard that the third is even better than this one.
Oh,
so I'm just like waiting to read it, which I hope I will do either this month or next month, so fingers crossed. But it was so good, and I'm so glad I finally continued the series, and would definitely recommend checking it out, for sure.
Alrighty, that wraps it up.
We made it to the end of this third 2020 reads.
Goodbye 2020, hello 2021.
Officially bye 2020 reads, and hello 2021 reads.
So in which case, if you've seen any of these,
read any of them, have any thoughts, feel free to holler at us. And then we'll try to holler back as much as possible. Things have been crazy. The reading goes on. Yep, and we will see you guys with another video soon. Bye!